Hello, and welcome to the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined, as always, by my co-host, Scott Pianowski. Scott, how are you doing on this Monday afternoon?
Doing great. It's a fun week of baseball. We had a great U.S. Open, middle of May. You should know now where your fantasy team is at. And, as I always say, it's when I start playing favorites, right? Those teams that are in first place, I'm giving them a little bit extra care, going to make sure I stay ahead of you in the Yahoo Friends and Family League, among other things. But, I'm really enjoying the season. And I'm glad that obviously we have a lot of injuries we're going to talk about to start the podcast, which is kind of typical for our Monday show. But at least that whole April, every pitcher is going to break. You can't enjoy anything. Why can't we have nice things? I feel like that's kind of slowed down a little bit. And maybe that's part of what you get. A lot of those injuries tend to cluster earlier in the season. There will be more injuries, of course. There will be more Tommy John surgeries and stuff like that. But I feel like that's stabilized somewhat and has given the season a little bit of just, allow it to breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. It has been nice to see a little bit of normalcy return to a certain extent. And the storylines have been, who's struggling and who's getting called up, but it's not all doom and gloom all over the place. Of course, unless that's if you roster Edwin Diaz, which is
I'll say one thing before we get to Diaz. You know what is doom and gloom? I don't have any Paul Skenes, and he looked. And I know we don't know how many innings he's going to throw, and obviously because he throws so hard, you worry about what his longevity is going to be, both in the short term and the long term. But man, did he look? That was as unhittable as a guy could look for 6 innings, I thought. Did you get a chance to see that start?
I did, yeah. It's funny. The first start was good, but I felt like the first start, everybody talked about his utter domination, and I think we glossed over the fact that like his command really wasn't there in the first start. The fastballs were like all over the place. He struck guys out, but obviously those are the nerves of a first MLB start. And the command looked great in the second start. I mean, the fastball command in particular was tremendous. That splinker is a devastating pitch. It was fun. It was good. It was fun to see. It was good to see. Him and Jared Jones are a really solid top 2 of the rotation and will be for, a long time and hopefully a long time in Pittsburgh, hopefully for Pirates fans.
I thought you had the right grade. The first start I thought was like a B-, a C+. It was encouraging, but there was certainly plenty of room to grow. And then, you got to give him an A+ for that Chicago start. And I saw one of those tweets where they have the video game graphics where it puts you in the batter's box for all of his pitches. And it's just like he's just throwing wiffle ball. It's like the Kerry Wood game, right? I mean, if people are old enough to remember that, where it's like, how the hell do you hit this? I don't know. And of course, he gets taken out with a no-hitter, which is that's the world we live in now. Nobody was never going to be allowed to go to complete that game. But he's appointment television now. Unfortunately, again, I have him on none of my teams, but you're not a baseball fan if you're not enjoying the story and rooting for this story.
Sure, and so everybody knows, like, he's going to have some bad starts. Like, it's just the nature of the game with rookie pitchers. We saw it. I know that Christian Scott isn't the pitcher that Skenes is, but like Christian Scott, 2 really good starts to start his career, including one against the Braves. So what does he do against the Marlins? Falls on his face. Like, those things are going to happen with young pitchers as they adapt to the MLB schedule, the routine, there's going to be some inconsistencies. So like you hold on to these guys. You love having them on the roster. Christian Scott's now down to just 39% rostered. You should pick him up if he's in your league. Like, there's a lot of talent there. You're not going to have a chance to pick up Skenes, but like if you have him and the bad start comes, you don't have to look to sell off. Like, these are just the natural roller coasters you get with rookie pitchers. And unlike with rookie hitters, I think with pitchers, you kind of hold on a little bit more because that those ebbs and flows are going to happen with these starts.
For sure. There's even been a little bit of ebb and flow with Jones, who's been terrific. And as you said, the Pirate fans have to be thrilled about those guys. But anybody who took Jones at his, and I give you a lot of credit because I know you were banging on that drum all March. I was not ignoring you all March, but whatever. I didn't get any of Jones either. So, maybe I should just black myself out from Pittsburgh games because it's going to be depressing because Jared Jones, he's one of those guys, even when he has a bad start, it's like, oh yeah, 3 runs, 8 strikeouts.
Yeah. No, they're fun. We're going to go over some other fun young players and just some guys hitting, hitting their stride a little bit. Obviously, this is our waiver wire show on Monday, so we're going to go over the top waiver claims, but also just guys who are coming off some pretty strong weeks. We'll split it up between hitters and pitchers. We'll do the hitters first and the pitchers at the end, because a lot of pitcher pitcher ads are kind of like matchup based. We want to really look at guys who might be more long-term focused. We'll start with some news and notes at the top, as always. The big news in baseball right now is, that Edwin Diaz has been taken out of the closer role just for a little bit of time. The Mets have basically said they're going to go with a fluid closer situation, just to get Diaz, back feeling like himself. The velocity's down a little bit. I mean, I think we also have to remember that, an Achilles injury, even though it's not an arm injury, is not a nothing injury for a pitcher. You're doing a lot of pushing off and a lot of landing and a lot of things where, like, if you're not feeling 100%, or if you need to build up the strength in your, in your leg muscles, like, it can lead to some inconsistencies. Also, closers are naturally volatile, and it might just be a situation where he's going through a rough patch. His brother's going through a rough patch in Cincinnati. Obviously, you hope that Diaz can bring it back. You have long-term concerns about Edwin Diaz. If you have him, are you like benching him for a week or something, since it's probably not going to be save situations this week? How are you approaching this?
Well, the good news is that I already had a lot of Reed Garrett shares, and he's going to be, along with Adam Ottavino, you would think, the main beneficiary from all this. Garrett picked up a working class save, 2 innings, 4 strikeouts on Sunday. The problem with Diaz is that if Garrett and Ottavino are smooth, Diaz is the guy, right? I mean, he's got the contract. They traded so much to get him, and that those investments mean something. They want to go back to what the preseason hierarchy was in this bullpen, but it could be difficult if Diaz doesn't pitch well for a while and the other guys are getting game. I mean, you have to some degree, have the respect of you're doing what's best for the team. You're traveling with these guys, and if somebody's not doing the job in the ninth inning, there's nothing more gut punching than you have a game, you've chalked it up as a win, and then you don't win it because somebody pitches poorly in the ninth inning. The blame all rests with one player. And so you almost have to make a change like this just for the integrity of the ball club. Mm-hmm. I'm just glad I didn't draft Diaz. I think he'll, at the end of the season, what does he have? 5 saves now? He'll probably have like 25 saves at the end of the season. But I would not, even if he's like available now at discount, I'm nervous enough on what I've seen that I'd have to really like the price. I can't say he's a proactive buy for me.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it depends. Obviously, like you said, it depends on the price you're getting for him. I don't have long-term concerns. I will say in like NFBC formats that have weekly lineup blocks, I benched him in a lot of places this week where I felt like I had a decent another relief option. Like in one league, I benched him for Jeff Hoffman, who, is not the closer in Philadelphia, but he gets some late inning shares. I benched him for, I picked up a lot of Trevor McGill. I was going to say Tyler McGill, but Trevor McGill, where he was like a 4th reliever option for me. So I made that swap a few places just because I think even if Diaz gets back the closer role soon, I think they just announced that he's going to be used in low leverage situations. So I wouldn't expect many save opportunities this week. And we know he's been struggling, to find his groove. So like, I'll give him a week on my bench too. And if I miss a save, so be it. I'm just going to try to be proactive and see if I could snag 1 or 2 from somebody else.
Yeah. There's also an emotional security in that, where if he doesn't pitch well, you think, oh, I did the right thing, I benched him. And then if the worst thing that happens is he finds himself on your bench, at least you can feel comfortable playing him the following week. The thing that shocks me about Diaz, and you mentioned the velocity is down, to see him having 5 home runs allowed this early in the season shocks me. If you had told me before the season, middle of May, Diaz is going to have an ERA over 5, they're going to take him out of the closers wrong. I'd be, is he walking the ballpark? He can't locate. Is he not striking guys out? No, those aren't the problems. People are teeing off on this guy, and we've never seen that before, right? And he's been one of the hardest guys to hit a home run off. So that's a little bit concerning. But relievers, as you mentioned, they run hot, they run cold. And even good closers just have stretches like for 3 weeks where they can't get anybody out. That's not unusual. So again, I said 5 saves now, probably be in the 20s by the end of the season. But I think Garrett and Ottavino are going to be rosterable the rest of
For
the
sure.
year. I mean, Garrett's got the video game numbers. I know the whip is kind of high, but 41 strikeouts in 25 innings. You know, a lot of times he pitches multiple innings, gets you like 4 strikeouts. We've shifted. The fantasy strategy has shifted. It used to be like, okay, I got to get those 2 starts. I got to chase wins and everything. And we've realized that you can actually get competitive strikeouts and quote unquote chase wins. I know Garrett's lucky to have 5 wins. There's a lot of good fortune there, but part of that is pitching high leverage situations. And so in the past, if you had a non-closer reliever in your roster, people like, you know, in your lineup, people are like, what are you doing? You're not getting any saves. You're like occasional win. You get killed in strikeouts. The shape of baseball is different now. These guys, they have such high strikeout rates. Again, sometimes they throw multiple innings. The high leverage might lead to wins and saves anyway, even if they're not the closer. And that makes Reed Garrett's one example, but there's probably like 8 to 10 relievers. You know, like David Robertson's not getting saves in Texas. He's been rosterable, I think, in medium or deeper leagues all season because he's putting up good ratios too. So it just reflects how the shape. I think there was a time when that swing man you had on your staff was almost always a starter. I think it probably makes more sense for that player to be a reliever now.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that. I mean, the value of those relievers we've talked about a few times this year. Luke Weaver in New York, the other side of New York, the Yankees is another guy. Matt Strahm for the Phillies has been that kind of guy for a couple of years now. So yeah, Ottavino and Garrett should definitely both be added in the short term. I think Reed Garrett had the big bids this weekend, but I do think Ottavino is worth. He has closed in the past. I do think he was worth some small bids. I think if he's available in your league, go. I don't think you need to drop anybody crazy, but like having him on the bench, if he's the guy or a guy for a couple weeks and can steal 3-4 saves, like that's still valuable for you. And he's been solid overall.
Man, I didn't realize he was 38. Yeah, he's been around for a while.
Broke in
with the Cardinals a million years ago. I think he played with Stan Musial and Gary Templeton and Ozzie Smith and all those guys. But
I played against him in high school. He was the same age.
Did you really?
I appreciate you going off about how old he is right now.
Okay, yeah. Did you get hits off him? Or how was he to hit?
He wasn't the same as he is now.
Mm-hmm.
That slider was not something that he had in in high school. He was also like, if I had to guess, I would have said he's probably like 86, 87 in high school, run it up to 88, but he was like a big bodied guy. He was still a tall, he was still a big dude.
Yeah.
So, I think that's obviously a projectionable frame. And the slider, but he got it in college, like kind of draft. I actually didn't know if it was in college or afterwards, but he didn't have that in high school.
I got to ask you the important thing though.
Yeah.
And then I promise we'll get on track. I know we have a lot to break down and the usual time to do it. How do you feel about pitchers? He's number 0 in your program.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Jack Flaherty's number 9? Snell, I think, is 7. How do you feel about pitchers wearing single digits?
It's weird, but it doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting used to it. I didn't like it at first. It just, I don't know, it just seemed weird to me. But it's funny, like in the NFL, they changed the wide receiver. They changed all the uniforms.
Well, they changed all the rules. You get linebackers number 4.
Right. But now none of the receivers want to wear numbers in the 80s anymore. Like the Cowboys had that talk. CD Lamb into saying, "Oh no, 88's a legacy number." Drew Pearson wore it. Michael Irvin wore it. You're part of that. Des Bryant wore it, right? So it's kind of like it's almost like 44 at Syracuse, 88 for the Dallas Cowboys. Number 1 at Michigan is a big number, so that's kind of cool. But nobody in the NFL wants those receivers. All want to be digits or maybe something in the teens. Nobody wants the numbers in the 80s anymore. It feels what Stroman is 0 for the Yankees too, right? So a couple of zeros out there. I don't know. Generally, I'm in favor of let the guys wear whatever numbers they want, but for some reason, that single digit for pitchers, it's taken a while for me to get. And I know it's a few years old now, but it's taken a while for me to get adjusted to it. Yeah,
I say more power to you. Just go for it.
What number did you wear?
21. That's my number. We're gonna get to some good news. So Adolis Garcia. This morning, Jeff Wilson of Rangers Today put out a Monday newsletter, which said that all the imaging came back good on Adolis Garcia, and there's optimism that he'll play on Tuesday. Optimism, obviously, is not a sure thing, but that seems to be at least a good indication that he's not going to go on the IL. Maybe he misses a game or 2 this week, but it seems like we've avoided anything catastrophic from Adolis Garcia, which is nice.
I hope
Jorge
so. I'd
Soler,
like to get the same news from Austin Riley, by the way. He's been day to
who
day for like 3 weeks. It
and
feels like.
didn't start the first game of the doubleheader
Yeah.
today.
Hopefully the second game. We'll see.
Hopefully the second game. Otherwise, I don't understand why he wasn't just put on the 10-day.
Right. What are you
IL instead
doing?
of
You
somebody else.
have something for
Yeah.
this, right? Why
Right.
should you play a man down? It doesn't make any sense.
Jorge Soler is back. That Giants offense got really hot this weekend. Soler was not hitting particularly well coming into the year, was chasing a lot more out of the zone. Pop-up rate was much higher than in years past, but we know that Soler has really good power. So again, I don't think he's a must roster in like 10, 12 team type of formats. But I think if you need power, awesome. And if you're in deeper formats, he's going to play pretty much every day in that Giants lineup. So that's valuable. And then Jung-Hoo Lee for the Giants, they did just announce, we covered his injury last week. They announced that he's out for the year with that shoulder injury. So that is an unfortunate turn of events.
I'd go.
But I'm just curious.
I'd trade for Soler right now if you.
So
could.
you're
He's
in all
better than this.
formats?
Well, I mean, some formats you can't make trades like NFBC,
Sure,
but
yes.
for one thing, I mean, the playing time kind of cleans up nicely because Lee's out for the year. Conforto's hurt, and he's got a history of being hurt. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they have the DH now in play. This is such a typical Giants lineup, right? It's just a hodgepodge of odd collected pieces, right? Mm-hmm. It always feels like they got a little bit of a yard sale vibe to it, with veterans and platoon guys and players that you were late bloomers and reclamation projects and I know we're going to talk about a couple of their pickup ideas, but Jorge Soler, what did he hit? 45 home runs last year or something like that. He's led the league 36 last year, and he's got 48 in his. I know it was the happy fun ball year in Kansas City, but I mean, when he came out with Chicago, we knew he had awesome power. I still think at the end of the year, Jorge Soler could push for 30 home runs. I would trade for him right now.
Yeah, I agree with that on the home runs, and so I think that if you are looking for home runs, he's certainly somebody to go ahead and roster. I think in 15 team leagues, you can roster him across the board because we know what his upside is. In 10 or 12, if you're good on home runs, I could see leaving him on the wire or not making a move for him.
That's fair.
I think,
fair.
You might want to attack other areas. Byron Buxton is also back for the Twins, which led to Austin Martin getting demoted. Listen, Buxton was hovering around the 50% roster mark in Yahoo formats for a while because the season hasn't been great. Is hitting 250 with just one home run and one stolen base and a 3% walk rate. But I think, we have seen Buxton as a power hitter. I mean, it's another thing where he hasn't stolen double-digit bases since 2019 when he stole 14. Buxton is, I know he's a name, but he's also not a guy that I'm running out to get. Again, in deeper formats, he's going to play pretty much every day for the Twins. They'll rest him here and there. We understand what the upside is. But in 10 and 12 team leagues, I no longer think Buxton is somebody where it's like, he's back. I have to add him.
No, I think you're right. He's 34% rostered right now. Buxton is in Yahoo. And I think you mentioned those thin leagues. I wouldn't bother with him. And Willie Castro, he's actually been cut in about 4% of Yahoo leagues over the last day, but he's still 67% roster. So his tag is twice as much as Buxton. He can play 4 different positions. Now, in most leagues, that means you can't pick him up right now. But my hot take is I have a team where my partner and I roster both Castro and Buxton. If it comes down to at some point we have to cut somebody, I'm going to say we should cut Buxton. I do. I just don't. He's capable of hitting 209. He doesn't really want to run anymore. I think the power eventually will come back, but you never know when he's going to get hurt. And I say this with no joy, but he's gotten hurt so many years in a row that it has to be considered part of his profile. I'm not breaking any news there. I'd much rather have, and I know the roster tags make this a slam dunk, so maybe this sounds kind of hot takey, but I think Willie Castro is easily the more rosterable player on a Twins offense. And we said before the season, right? How healthy will they be? It's a kind of a hard team to get a handle on, but I think Castro's kind of been their not that he's even been that great. He's hitting 265, 3 homers, 6 steals. Those are good numbers. His run production stats are okay, but that's the guy I want in this slot, not Byron.
I think that's hot takey enough given the name value
for sure.
Also returning allegedly, right, has not officially happened, but it is going to happen, is Dansby Swanson coming back for the Cubs.
Yep.
That should shift Nico Horner back to second. Nico Horner has missed all of the last week. Hopefully he will return and they'll get their middle infield back. The Cubs also announced that they're going to call up Luis Vasquez, who is their 13th ranked prospect. Shortstop, defense first shortstop, hitting .262 in AAA this year, with 3 home runs, 1 stolen base. So there's nothing really actionable there, but just understand he's going to be up as well. I don't know there's much you can do here. Most people were holding Swanson if he was available in your league for whatever reason. He's going to be returning, and he's somebody I would certainly go to get. But I don't think there's much we could do with this news other than say, great, he's back, and the Cubs lineup gets a little better.
Yeah, the only thing I'm kind of keeping my eye on is Mike Tauchman, who's an outfielder and a DH for these guys, 372 on base percentage. He scored 29 runs in 44 games. He's got 4 home runs. He's got 3 steals. Just a really nice offensive player. And I would love to see, he's always been a part-timer. He's always been kind of a rover, somebody who plays in pinches. Right now, OPS plus a 125. I'd love to see what he'd do in a full season, because I think he could score like 90 runs. I think he could be like a 15 homer, 8 steal, 260, 380, 420 type of player. That's basically what he's been right now. And usually he's batting first or second for a good Cubs lineup, right? And a lot of guys have been hurt here. Bellinger was hurt for a while. Swanson was hurt. There's been other injuries, and they have some interesting pieces. Christopher Morel is one of the most fascinating guys in baseball. He's a smaller guy, but he's learned how to look for his pitch and become a power hitter, and a power hitter all fields as well. Sarah Sanchez was talking about that last week. So the Cubs are a fascinating team because their lineup's different every day. And look, Swanson's going to play. He should play. He's obviously got the big contract. He's a wonderful defensive player. He's a good offensive player. I just hope this team, the construction of it, allows Tauchman to play a full season. One, because I have him rostered, so it's, of course, personal. But I think he could be the cheapest 90-run player you could find on the board. And he's going to hit for a quality average. He's really good in OBP leagues, and he's not a 0 in the category juice columns.
Yeah. We have some breaking news right now. Xander Bogaerts just hurt his shoulder diving for a ball, and was taken out of the game in the first game of the doubleheader. Obviously, your thought goes to Trevor Story diving for a ball and hurting his shoulder and being out for the year. This doesn't look as serious. Obviously, Trevor Story was in immediate and clear pain. This is something we're going to have to, keep an eye on. We don't have any breaking news for you here in terms of the type of injury, but keep an eye on that, because that could be an IL stint. Shoulder injuries are particularly tricky. Usually diving and hurting your shoulder, at least leads to some kind of strain. So that could be, more playing time for guys like Tyler Wade or Donovan Solano, or nobody who's like incredibly exciting to you. But that could be a hurt thing for Xander Bogaerts. Yeah,
in one of my leagues, we have weekly lineups, and we can't make changes after the lineup is set. So I think we're stuck with Bogaerts for the rest of the week. But he's been one of the big disappointments anyway. I was curious what your status was on him, just not counting this injury today. Was he a hold, a buy, a sell? Where do you come down on Xander?
I think he was just a hold. I wasn't actively looking to buy. I liked that the stolen bases were up last year, and they seem to be trending to a similar pace this year. I always felt like the batting average would come back up to something like closer to 270 or whatever, but I thought the power wouldn't, he would be a 15 homer guy again. I felt like he would settle into who he was. And so we'll see how that goes.
It always seemed weird to me that he got such a monument. He's a good player, but he got like almost like a borderline MVP contract with the Padres. Yeah. I think that deal is not going to age very well.
No, especially because they already moved him and they're thinking about moving him positions again. Right. I don't think it's going to age well. He is currently playing second base, which leads us to our next guy coming back. Allegedly, Brandon Lowe is coming back for the Rays this week, despite multiple setbacks on his oblique. I think we kind of know who Brandon Lowe is at this point. He's not going to play versus lefties. He's going to play most of the time versus righties. He's there for power. The batting average isn't going to be high. He's blocking Junior Caminero from getting a call up. Do you have any interest in rostering Brandon Lowe in formats?
No, he's just a pain in the neck. The batting average is a risk. He may or may not run. As you said, he's not going to be in the lineup every day. He's had injury setback. You can't count on him. He's played really one full season in his career, and he's already into his age 29 season. I think he's just been a fantasy. Other than that one mantra, again, the 39 homer year was great. Every other year, if you drafted this guy, you've regretted it.
Yeah. And that's sad. And even like in AL only formats, I'm like, I would obviously, you would roster him because he's going to play, but you're not going to feel.
To be fair, I should say he was in 2019. He was an all-star, and actually in 2020 he was good, really good in the pandemic season. It's just so hard to know what to make of that.
Right.
But yeah, in
also
2022, 23 goes down as a loss, and then this year, I mean, he's been really bad when he's played. I know it's only 30 at bats, and
I also understand that like he saw a specialist and they cleared him and he's coming back, but he had multiple setbacks with his oblique where it didn't feel right as he was on his rehab assignment. And we know how tricky obliques are. He just saw a specialist like 4 days ago, so like I know that they might call him back up, but forgive me for feeling like he's not 100% healthy or that oblique could, come up at any moment.
And when you roster him, by the way, you're just inheriting a chore, like it's like taking out the trash, because you always have to check the lineup if you're in a daily format, and if you're in a weekly format, you're like, okay, how many lefties are they facing? And then you run into like what I might have run into today with Bogarts, that early week injury. It's just going to be so frustrating. We know Tampa Bay, they're not happy unless it's a different lineup every day anyway.
Right.
There's going to be weeks, even when he's healthy, he may play 3 or 4 times a week, and then the moment he has any kind of a setback, they'll pull back. He's a little bit like Buxton. This is the guy you look at the upside. He hit 39 home runs a minute ago. I'll get in on that. I'll get him at a cheap cost, and he'll be a high upside player. You remember, there's no floor here whatsoever.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I can't do it either.
I'm more interested in rostering the other guy who we're going to talk about, who was actually the only real call-up of note this week. The Dodgers shook things up. They activated Jason Hayward from the IL. They called up Miguel Vargas from AAA, and they sent James Outman down to AAA. James Outman, I think, is a safe drop in all redraft formats. I would still be holding on to him in dynasty-type leagues. I think there's something intriguing, but again, I think you move on. In redraft. My question for you about Miguel Vargas is, are you willing to buy back in? He's just 24. His debut last year in 81 games with the Dodgers did not go particularly well. However, he seems to have found a little bit of his power stroke in AAA. He was hitting .295. He had 8 home runs and 8 stolen bases in 39 games. Walk rate of 19%, strikeout rate of 16.5%. I know you love when the walk rates are higher than the strikeouts. He was playing left field every day in AAA. I know last year he was a second baseman, so maybe he can play outfield and second. His one start so far in the big leagues this year was in left field. Are you buying back in on Miguel Vargas, or is it just like the Dodgers lineup is too hard to pin down and he wasn't great last year and we don't know where to go?
Yeah, in the deeper leagues, I'd be buying now, and probably for the majority of our listeners, he's a guy to have on your watch list. See if something pops here. Last year, and you talk about, yes, I do love it when the guys have more walks than strikeouts. But even last year, when he hit under 200, his walk rate was great. His strikeout rate wasn't bad, and he was a player who I know he was always flashing the unlucky stats, that his batting average was significantly lower than what it should have been. Now that didn't ultimately normalize. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes teams aren't patient enough with it, but Outman deserved to be benched, and any spot in this Dodger lineup. And I realize Vargas batted 8th in his debut. He's probably going to slot in the bottom of that lineup because we know who's at the top of it, but there could be traction here. He has a couple different ways to get into the lineup. They're going to give him a chance. As you said, the category juice was there. The plate discipline was there in the minors. He's only 24. We're always looking for who can we get in on at a really inexpensive cost, who has significant growth potential or spike potential. And this is the type of play. This is a profile where there's plausible upside. So again, in a deep league, you pick him up, you watch list him in a medium league. Maybe next week he's one of your pickups, and you see where it goes for a few weeks. If it doesn't work out, okay, he's one of the fluid guys that you cut at your bottom of your roster. But yeah, I'm putting a check mark next to Vargas. I think there's certainly plausible upside here.
Yeah, and also just to note, everybody thought the Dodgers were going to demote Andy Pages with these moves. Not only did they not demote him, but he's still hitting 5th in the lineup. I said this on Twitter. I just think, given the quality of the lineup and given the power he has shown, I'm not moving on from him until the Dodgers do. I'm happy to, if you want to bench him, go for it. He did homer last night. Like, I think if the Dodgers are going to continue to hit this guy in the middle of their lineup, and we've seen what he can do, I don't think you move on from him. I think you can bench him. But this is the first cold streak he's really had at the big league level. Like, let's see how he adjusts to it. Let's see what he does before we just say, well, this is it. It's over.
Yeah, not the greatest walk strikeout rate, but still an OPS plus of 112. I know it's
and the walk rates in the minors have always been really good.
Right.
So,
and he's 23. I think it was a week ago. My colleague, I want to say Dalton Del Don, was saying that he thought Paez would go down as one of the waiver wire ads of the year. I don't have any Paez, which I did. If he was dropped anywhere, I'd be looking to add him. I still think I think he actually has a floor and an upside. Mm-hmm. And as you said, if the Dodgers are batting him fifth, that tells you they haven't soured on him at all. Yeah, he's definitely hold on to him. Don't do anything rash. See how this plays out.
A couple of just quick notes, nothing actionable here, but Grayson Rodriguez, Blake Snell, and Joe Musgrove are all back. They were likely all on rosters anyway, so there's nothing you can really do. The Grayson Rodriguez return means that Cole Irvin will move to the bullpen. Most leagues you weren't rostering Cole Irvin. If you're in a really deep league and you were, he is now out of the bullpen, so that could probably get him off your roster. And then two other moves. I'm curious if you have interest in either of these guys. The Mets have activated Tylor Megill, who will be back in their rotation and is set allegedly. I mean, we'll see how it works out, but is set for a 2-start week this week, starting today against the Guardians. Actually, no, they're going to a 6-man rotation. I forgot. So he's just going to get 1 start against the Guardians. And then the Angels traded for Ronzi Contreras, who was at one point an interesting prospect. He was a top 60. He was a 67th overall prospect just 2 years ago in baseball. It has really not panned out in Pittsburgh, and he was moved to the bullpen. The Angels have said they could move him back to the rotation. They'll see how things go. Just curious if you have any interest in any size leagues in Megill or Contreras.
They'll have to play their way onto my roster. I love the Angels just collecting these lost toys. Again, they will not be happy until they play 9 guys who were not sure they were still in baseball. Or, in the players, maybe you can set your watch by will be Joe Adele, post-type sleeper. And we're still Zach Neto forever, man. I still think Zach Neto is under rostered. I'm going to bang on that drum until it gets fixed. But Contreras will have to pitch his way onto my roster. And Megill, I don't know, man. I look at his pages and I see a player who's good enough to be in the majors, but not good enough to be fantasy rostered. If there's if there's an angle there and you probably know more about him than I do, I'll listen to it, but I don't see it.
I think it might be just the bullpen, right? I think that might be the angle. And I know they're going with the 6-man rotation now, but it's like, if you could call Jose Budo back up and move Megill into the bullpen, like I think that might help you in all areas.
I'd rather see Budo pitch.
Yes, me too. I do still think this is a Mets team that's keeping these veterans in the rotation in the hope that they can deal them for some low-level prospect flyers at some point this summer. Yeah. And then Budo comes up and some of these other guys come
That's up. A key point, right? 21 and 25, already 12 games behind the Phillies. And congratulations, Phillies. I know they're having a great season, but I've never seen a team have a strength of schedule as weak as they have. They've put like 3 or 4 games against teams over 500. You can only play the teams on your schedule. That obviously means they have a bunch of Braves games coming. And the NL is top heavy now. There aren't that many teams above 500, so that's part of it. But the Mets know they're not going anywhere. Also, interesting Met change, by the way. And I know his batting average isn't that high, but they moved Brandon Nimmo down to the 3 slot. Lindor's been leading off.
They're all over the place. They moved Alonso to the 2 hole. Yeah, like they're just trying to do anything.
Nimmo's a guy. If somebody just is sick of his like 220 average or whatever he's hitting, Brandon Nimmo's a good player, man. And now that he's hitting 3rd, it's better for his run production. I still want Brandon Nimmo on all my teams.
I'm sure you could get him some places too. Before we get to the waiver wire picks of the weekend, get ready for the greatest spectacle in racing this Sunday. The world's fastest drivers go head-to-head for a chance to claim their place in racing history. It's the Indianapolis 500, beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, only on NBC and Peacock. That's 11 a.m. Eastern Time this Sunday, only on NBC and Peacock.
What a month for Peacock and NBC, man. You get the Triple Crown Racing Series, and then you get the PGA Championship, which is fantastic. You get the Indy 500. I mean, it's like Championship May over there. You had a great Premier League season, and just a lot going on.
People gotta get Peacock. Great movies and shows too. Let's get into some of these waiver wire pickups. The biggest name is Luis Matos, who somehow managed to get 16 RBIs in just 6 games. He was 10 for 26. That is a 385 batting average with 2 home runs, 16 RBIs, 3 runs scored. Do you buy this? Is this for real? Were you trying to add Luis Matos anywhere, everywhere? What were you doing?
I mean, it's just, his batting average and OBP are the same because he doesn't have a walk yet. Just the RBIs have fallen the right way. To have 17 RBIs on 2 home runs is really kind of fluky.
Yes.
And I think it's a fair question to ask, is Ramos the better pickup in this outfield, right? I mean, they're both young players. He's somebody who got more up. And we talked earlier about Lee being hurt, Conforto being hurt, moving parts in this outfield. I did not bid on Matos. And if this is legit, if he's real, I'm going to lose on that. But I was not. I think I might have put in a couple of token bids I knew would get beaten, but he was not somebody I proactively went after.
Yeah, he was hitting 218 in 31 games at AAA with 3 home runs and 3 steals. The contact rate was good, only a 9% strikeout rate in AAA. He was rocking a 218 BABIP, so I think that 218 batting average was probably lower than we would have expected. But those are not the stats of a guy who comes up and has 17 RBIs in 8 games and is crushing home runs. And I'm not particularly buying into what he's doing in the sense of like I'm not rushing to pick him up as the top waiver ad of the week. I think if you were able to get Luis Matos for a low bid, there's a chance, as we talked about with the Jung-Hoo Lee injury, that he's playing, pretty much every day. He is the center fielder. Heliot Ramos, who you mentioned, is not a center fielder. He's playing because Conforto's out. He's playing left field. Mm-hmm. And so his playing time might appear a little more tenuous when Conforto comes back. But Ramos was the guy hitting 296 with 8 home runs in 30 games at AAA, also off to a decent start, hitting 293 in 11 games. So I'm happy to grab the lower bids on him and just hope that he can, keep his way on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, that's just 296, but a 388 OBP, a 565 slugging with 8 home runs. Yeah, great walk strikeout rate. He had a couple of stolen bases. That's the screen thing here. Is that one guy get a bunch of RBIs, but Ramos is the player. And I realized that with the defensive value and where he slots when everybody's healthy, we'll worry about that when we get to it. I think getting Ramos is the preferable move here, and you got him more inexpensively than the other option. I think that was the right play all along.
Yeah, I was happy to take I didn't get any Heliot Ramos, but I was happier to do smaller bids on him than big bids on Matos.
I got him in tout like a week ago, and I was in anywhere nationally only tout. Anytime you can get a player who's playing semi-regularly, you're just like thrilled. I mean, Connor Joe is like my MVP right now because it's like I got him on the free agent.
He's been great.
I got him in the reserve draft. It's just oh wow, if he gets 400 bats, I'll be thrilled. Now I think he's going to get 600 bats.
Yeah, he's been off to a really good year and playing pretty much every day. Speaking of playing pretty much every day, well, actually, that's the interesting thing. Kevin Pillar seemed like he was playing pretty much every day for the Angels. Over the week, which was over the last 5 games, he was 9 for 17. That's a 529 batting average with 1 home run, 5 runs scored, 7 RBIs, 3 steals. Seemed like he was going to be another one of these Angels veterans who they were putting in every day, but then he sat the last 2 games. Was not in the starting lineup the last 2 games as the Angels decided to go back to Mickey Moniak for some reason. I think that saved a lot of people on Sunday night from bidding too aggressively on Kevin Pillar. We've seen him be a fine major league 4th outfielder. He can run. He plays defense. I think the offensive explosion we saw when he first signed with the Angels was a fluke. And it's pretty clear, like, if the Angels are willing to bench him from Mickey Moniak when he's hitting this well, it's not going to take a lot to keep Kevin Pillar on the bench.
Yeah, you're right. He did save bidders from themselves. And I just love looking at this lineup. It's like Willie Calhoun. Oh, cute. Joe Adell's having a nice breakout season. Moniak, a former number 1 overall pick who never really put together, can't play every day because he can't hit lefties. They had Miguel Sano on this roster earlier in the season. It's just an island of lost misfit toys. And at least Ron Washington's, he's got a loose team. He's letting everybody run. My my stance is the same. I'm in on Adele. I'm in on Neto. Rengifo is one of those guys I love because he plays everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's healthy again. He'll bat first or second probably the rest of the season as long as he's healthy. I'm in on all those guys. Not in on Calhoun. I'm not in on basically the rest of this roster, and that includes Kevin Pillar. Again, one of those, he's still in baseball guys. He got MVP consideration like 4 or 5 years ago, believe it or not. He was a nice power speed guy at his peak, but I don't think this is real at all.
I might get back in on like Brandon Drury when he comes back.
Yes,
he would be the only other name I would mention.
Yeah, another multiple position guy who in a full season would probably hit 25 home runs.
I'm super in on Joey Ortiz.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Joey Ortiz coming into the year because the hard hit data in the minor leagues was pretty good. He was somebody who hit the ball hard, but was not going to hit tons of home runs, but was a plus defender. And so you pair plus defense with solid exit velocities, and you're like, okay, this is a guy who, could probably hit for a high enough batting average play most days, chip in some homers, chip in some steals. He is now starting every day at third base. Over the last week, he's 10 for 22. That's a 455 batting average with 2 home runs, 7 runs scored, 4 RBIs. He's hitting 6th in the order for a Brewers team that we've talked about has been surprisingly good to start this year. I think that he will, chip in some homers for you this year. I know he's not running a lot. So I don't know that you're going to get, more than 5 steals, but I think you get between 12 and 15 homers and a pretty good batting average. And so I really like Joey Ortiz in deeper formats.
I do too. Other than the speed, you're getting everything else. The walk strikeout rate is almost 1, which is great. 292, 387, 538. The defense keeps him in the lineup. I'd like to see him move a little bit higher. He's been batting in the 6th slot lately. He started in the bottom third of the order, but Milwaukee's probably got a plus lineup right now. And a lot of guys like this who come out of nowhere. We didn't know what Terang was going to be. He immediately established himself as a plus player here. There's going to be a lot of right answers, I think, from this Milwaukee lineup. And because there's a broad base of skills, I mean, the worst thing you can say about Ortiz is, okay, he's not going to run, and his power, and maybe like a Jeff Cirillo type where he's going to hit 15 home runs or 17 home runs or whatever. If he hits for a plus average and plays every day and has decent run production, I think that's 12 team, or certainly 15 team, 14 team. But even in a 12 team league, I think Ortiz makes sense, and his Yahoo tag is under 50%. So let's get that fixed.
And remember, having third base eligibility, third base is a little bit of a mess right now.
It is.
And so there's definitely value in him in 12 team formats as a third baseman or corner infield or whatever you need. Another guy who's eligible at corner infield is Cardinals first baseman / outfielder Alec Burleson. We talked about a little bit about how the Cardinals are a mess this season, but that has opened up some playing time for Burleson, who's only 25 years old, but was kind of thought of as like, oh, he's blocking Jordan Walker. Oh, he's blocking Victor Scott. Well, over the last week, he is 10 for 23, 435 batting average with 2 home runs, 1 stolen base, 5 runs scored. On the year, he has 5 home runs, 17 RBIs in 39 games with a 292 batting average. Strikeout rate is just 17.5%. No, he's not walking a lot. But hitting the ball hard enough, hitting in the middle of the Cardinals order. Are you interested in Alec Burleson, given that he's been producing this year?
It's funny because he actually had a pretty good walk rate last year, and it just seems like he's been more aggressive this year, and he's maybe selling out for power a little bit more. But hey, the power's coming. And what could this Cardinals lineup use is actually a young hitter in their 20s. It's just so many of their guys are older and not performing right now, so they can't turn their back on Burleson. He's a player. I realize this is going to sound very trite and convenient, but as long as it's working, I would ride the wave while you ride it, knowing that this could all evaporate at any point in time. But he's earned the right to have 2 bad weeks in a row. When he has 2 bad weeks in a row, I'll cut him. But for now, I think he's somebody you can play with a fair amount of confidence.
I love that approach. I fully agree on that. Jake Meyers of the Astros is interesting. He has kind of emerged as their everyday center fielder. He's starting 5 of the last 6 games in center and playing pretty well. 9 hits in 21 at bats. It's a 429 batting average, 2 home runs, 5 runs, 6 RBIs, 1 stolen base over the last week. He is somebody who was actually pretty good and was flashing for the Astros, I believe it was 2 years ago. I'll look that up right now. And he got hurt, and then he battled back from the injury, and things just weren't really quite the same with him. But he's hitting 302 with 5 home runs this year, a sub 20% strikeout rate. I'm curious if you're interested in Jake Meyers and what also this does to your confidence level in Chas McCormick coming back, because right now McCormick wasn't playing particularly well. Jake Meyers, you could argue, is playing too good to just immediately go to the bench. So what? I don't know that McCormick is also coming back into guaranteed everyday playing time right away. So curious your thoughts on both McCormick and Meyers.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I remember McCormick wasn't handed the center field job last year. He had to win it. He played better than people expected, but it's not like they were ever all in on McCormick. And what keep in mind Meyers, right? He's been great lately. And that coincides with the Astros, who got off to a horrible start. I think they've won 8 of their last 10, and they're back in the periphery of the AL West race. It helps that Seattle and Texas really aren't doing anything. They're right around 500. So Houston, they need to do with what's working, right? Meyers is playing not only is he playing way too well to bench right now, but I never thought McCormick was some sacred cow in Houston where it's like, oh, at the moment Chas McCormick comes back, he's back in the lineup. If somebody else is performing, they're going to have to stick with Meyers. So I'm at a point now where if you had a cluster of IL problems and McCormick was somebody you were considering dropping, or if you're in that NFBC format where you don't have the IL to play with, or you're in a league with capped IL, whatever it is, I don't think there's any reason to hold McCormick, because I think there's an excellent chance he comes back to a 4th outfielder spot.
I fully agree. And Joey Loperfido, I know the strikeout rate is high, but he's hitting 333 in his first 13 games. Like, they're not playing him against lefties, but he's been performing well enough against righties. I think they always expected the strikeout rate would be high. So we need to see that power come a little more than it has. But I think there's a world in which Loperfido continues to play against righties, and McCormick, and is splitting time with Meyers. They both play versus lefties, but we're mixing and matching there. And then, like, the other factor with the Astros is they claim that Jose Abreu is going to be back in like a week. They're going to end his exile. And so I guess that means John Singleton is out of the lineup. Who knows? But I think we're both in agreement that we're not rushing out to add Jose Abreu when he comes back.
Can you tell me why? I realize his stats aren't horrible, but I'm just used to Yordan Alvarez being like impossible to pitch to. And this year he's just 254, 330, 429. 429 slugging percentage for this guy. I'm used to him being like, if you had an at bat for your life, he'd be one of the 3 or 4 guys you'd consider. He doesn't look like that right now. Any theories on where Alvarez is headed?
I'd have to dig into it a little more. I kind of feel like it's with him, Acuna. Like, there's nothing that's glaring. I have to feel like
Julio Rodriguez, right? It's been a tough year for some of these top guys.
Yeah, and we're getting to the point now where it's more than just a little bit of a prolonged slump. But I do think like the lineup around him not really performing, aside from Kyle Tucker, does impact.
Altuve's been great too.
That's true.
And even Jeremy Payne has been a lot better. I had a league where I could have kept him for nothing, and I didn't keep him, and I regretted that. He's been great.
It was more when I was saying the lineup around him, I was thinking more like the hitters around him. Like Bregman has come on of late, but Bregman got off to a really slow start as well. The lineup just didn't seem deep. Like, we know that Abreu wasn't.
Abreu was just an automatic out for about a month. Yeah.
Right. And then you get like Yiner Diaz hasn't really taken off in the way that people thought that he was going to. So I thought it was maybe a little bit easier to pitch around Yordan, but I would need to look into like how teams have been pitching him, and maybe that's something we'll talk about on our Wednesday show. A couple more guys. We'll transition from the Jose Abreu to 2 veteran first basemen who are actually producing pretty well of late, and I'm curious if you're interested in either of Luke Raley or Josh Bell. So Luke Raley is 11 of 24 over the last 6 games, 2 home runs, 5 runs, 5 RBIs, 2 steals. We saw that power speed for Raley be a thing when he broke out with the Rays last year. Had a really, really rough start to the year. with the Mariners, but has come on of late, is playing against all right-handed pitching. And then Josh Bell, the last week he was 10 of 26. That's a 385 batting average, 1 home run, 6 RBIs. Again, Josh Bell, another guy who really struggled to start the year, but the Marlins are keeping him in the lineup every day. We've seen him get hot. We know that he, has the power to be a 25 homer guy, even in that park. They're both around like 22, 23% rostered in Yahoo formats. So I'm curious if in any leagues you're interested in adding either of Luke Raley or Josh Bell.
I mean, that walk strikeout rate on Raley is so ugly. And we know Seattle Park just mutes offense. So that makes it hard for me to trust him. Bell is only 31, but he's got old player skills. He's got that really good walk strikeout rate, but his slug, he's slugging 369 for a guy with that body type. You just think of him as a thumper. He does have 6 home runs, but if I had to pick one of these guys, I would lean towards Bell, but my expectations for both of them are pretty muted.
Fair. I'm a little bit higher on Raley. Raley has just 10 strikeouts in 14 games in May, which, might not seem great, might not seem like, something that's great, but it's way better than what he was showing earlier on in the year. The power speed is really interesting from Raley. He's also, I know it's a super small sample size, but he's 4 of 14 against left-handed pitching this year. And that's not really that bad from somebody who you're like, oh, he should never play against left-handed pitching. Like that's, almost a 300 batting average. So I would be curious if they would let him play a little bit more. And I just think
they're screaming for production too. That lineup.
I was going to say the Mariners lineup, I think it's better than it's playing. And so I'd rather have a piece of the Mariners lineup than the Marlins lineup. Raley is first base and outfield. Mm-hmm. Raley also will steal some bases. So I'm okay taking a stab on Luke Raley in deeper formats. He is somebody though, again, because we talked about he is going to sit against a lot of lefties. You do need to look at what are they facing this week? The Mariners face 3 lefties this week. So it's this might not be the week for Luke Raley, but those are the type of kind of annoying roster decisions you have to make.
That's life with left-handed hitters. I have Kerry Carpenter on a team, and it feels like the Tigers face 3 lefties every week, and I've never play him. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah. We're going to go to some pitchers who stood out as waiver wire ads for this week. But before we do that, American stars Sha'Carri Richardson, Christian Coleman, and Ryan Krauser continue their path to Paris at the Nike Prefontaine Classic. Watch one of track and field's premier events this Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern time on NBC and Peacock. That's the Prefontaine Classic this Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern time on NBC and Peacock.
I'll give you something else to watch, by the way. Watch Without Limits. There's been 2 movies. The Prefontaine Classic, obviously named after Steve Prefontaine, the kind of the James Dean of cross country. He was a shooting star who died in a car accident, I think at age 22. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was like a rock star. He had a lot to do with questioning rules of amateurism, and he was in the Olympics in Munich. Came in 4th in this. Anyway, they made 2 movies on this guy. He was a rock star, and one of them was with Jared Leto. The better movie is Without Limits. Donald Sutherland, Billy Crudup plays Prefontaine. It's also tangentially about the start of Nike Oregon track team. So it's a fascinating. Without Limits is one of those great movies that a lot of people haven't seen. So when you mentioned the Prefontaine Classic, I got to tell people to go watch Without Limits.
Yeah, I haven't either. I've seen the Jared Leto one, so I'll add it to my list. Will you be adding Alek Manoah to your lists? We talked about it before. We were, he was on track to win the 5th starter spot in spring, so people got interested. Then he was terrible in spring, and then he had a little bit of an injury that may have been a phantom injury, and who really knows, and he got sent on a rehab assignment. He looked atrocious early on in the rehab assignment, started to look okay, came back. His first start against the Nationals was absolutely gross. His last 2 starts, though, against the Rays and the Twins, combined 14 innings, 5 hits, 0 earned runs, 13 strikeouts, 2 walks.
There you go.
Are you buying back in on Alek Manoah.
Understanding there's no floor when you see that walk strikeout rate, and when it comes from somebody who was a star, unequivocally a star in 2022 All-Star team, third in the Cy Young voting, was considered one of the up-and-coming star pitchers in baseball, 2.24 ERA. I don't know what went wrong with Manoah last year. There's a lot of different theories. Of course, whenever a pitcher pitches poorly, you worry about it being physically related. But there are questions about his makeup, or maybe he's throwing the wrong sequence of pitches, whatever. I'm just excited. I didn't get any Manoah. I thought were competitive bids. I didn't get him in any of my leagues, but it's just nice to see a pitcher who lost his way for as long as Manoah did just be back in the scheme of things. I can't guarantee you there's no floor here. But when you see that walk strikeout rate with a pitcher who always had the kind of upside that Manoah did, I think you have to try to add him where you can.
Yeah, I will say I was super skeptical going into this last start. I didn't think – I know the results were good against the Twins, but I didn't think he looked particularly great. In particular, like the slider wasn't great. He was getting like a lot of work with the fastball, which is not something that he had done in the past. This start against the Rays, and I know the Rays offense has had their own struggles, but this start against the Rays was a lot better in terms of like the command, using the sinker inside to righties and like really pounding them inside, setting up the slider away. Like there were some things that were interesting. Now, I'm not fully back in by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still incredibly skeptical. But his next two starts are against the White Sox and the Tigers. So I will put him on my roster and see how it pans out. But I was not going to bid a crazy amount on him. And
no, I didn't either. And ultimately, I didn't get him.
Going to go crazy. And yeah. And I think that's fine. Like if somebody wants to bid a lot and get him because he was Alek Manoah and he was a Cy Young contender just a couple years ago, awesome. Go for it. Like that's just not, that's not for me. I don't currently believe enough, and maybe I'll miss out. But I believe enough for him to be on my bench, and we'll see how it goes. But I wouldn't drop anybody like who's really producing for him right now.
One sentence. Are we worried the Blue Jays are bad?
Yes.
Mediocre. I'm getting worried about this. Is the team I'm worried about. They're going to come in last in this division, I think.
I think the offense is a lot more mediocre than people necessarily believed, because we had projected these huge growth for these guys.
Yeah, I apologize. My dog Abby is barking like crazy. I think she's got a lot. She's got a lot to say about the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I think she agrees.
She rosters Bo Bichette, and Vladimir.
Hopefully she doesn't roster. Hopefully she doesn't roster Dante Bichette. She needs to update her leagues.
Dante Bichette might be the better Bichette this year.
It's possible. We talked about adding Taj Bradley a couple weeks ago.
Yes, we did.
Great first start against the Yankees. Came with a solid start against the Red Sox. 5 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 6 strikeouts. His command is still a little bit all over the place. And the fastball looks a little bit better, but the cutter, which he's changed, is inconsistent. Like there's a lot of, you see flashes, but it's super inconsistent. But he's only 43% rostered in Yahoo formats, and like there is that upside there. So like, are you taking a gamble on Taj Bradley over Alek Manoah?
I think Bradley has more upside, more strikeout upside. I mean, it's interesting. His strikeout rate has gone down, but the walk rate has gone down too. I'll make that trade off. Obviously it's going to be schedule dependent. I don't have in front of me who he's pitching against this week, because I wouldn't pitch him against the Yankees. But for example,
I believe it's Boston again, actually.
Okay. It's always interesting when they face a team twice in the same little rotation.
Didn't help the Cubs against Skenes. It's actually a 2-start week.
It really didn't help the Cubs against Skenes now.
It's a 2-start week for Bradley against the Red Sox and then the Royals over the weekend.
And I didn't realize the Royals.
Both at home too.
Okay. Then I can sign off on that.
Yeah. I like the upside. The command is a little bit of an issue. And so I need to see that get dealt with before I believe that like we're in a full-on breakout. But I do like Taj Bradley. I also like Reese Olson, who's only rostered in 47% of leagues. And I don't understand what Reese Olson needs to do, people. Like, he's made 8 starts. He has a 2.09 ERA. He has a 0.99 whip. He has a 22% strikeout rate. I understand he has no wins, and that is to me that's like crazy fluky. He throws 8 shutout innings against the Marlins last week with only giving up 3 hits, and he still can't get a win. But like he needs to be added. I don't understand why he's not added in far more leagues. He's been great this year. Like that roster tag needs to be up around like 70-80%, like by the end of the night tonight.
Totally agree. Really simple. He's made 8 starts. 1 of them was bad. 7 of them were good. Reese Olson's good. I get it. He's like the classic 5 or 6 inning pitcher. I know he went 8 against Miami. He did have a 7 inning start against Kansas City. So yeah, the wins, I can't guarantee you're going to be there, but the strikeouts are there. The stuff plays. Look at the ERA. Again, I know sometimes fantasy consistency can be a little bit of a red herring because everybody's going to have bad starts sometimes, but I feel like every time I look at a Reese Olson box score, it's good. It's helping my bottom line, even though I don't get the win. So he should be. If you would ask me to guess before we set up this show in the rundown what his tag was, well, yeah, 70%, 65, 70%. I can't believe he's still under the 50% threshold. That's just a market correction that needs to be made.
We'll end with the two of the biggest 2-start pitchers, I believe, that were picked up in a lot of leagues this week. Obviously, this podcast will come out Monday afternoon, so there's a chance that people still have time to grab either of these guys. Just curious your interest level in general in Ryan Weathers, who's been pitching to a 3.81 ERA for the Marlins so far. He gets Milwaukee at home and then the Diamondbacks on the road. And then Ben Lively of the Guardians, who has a 3.06 ERA. He stumbled in his last start against the Rangers, but we really weren't going to pitch him against the Rangers anyway. But Ben Lively starts against the Mets on Monday and then against the Angels on Sunday. I'm curious if you were into either of these guys this week.
I could have sworn Lively got hit in his last start. Maybe
against the Rangers.
Right, yeah, maybe I'm conflating that. But Weathers I actually bid on in NL Tout, and only one other and put a pretty competitive bid in there. Only one other team was interested. So I ended up getting him. And, 8 scoreless against Detroit. His last 3 starts have been decent. He's more of a matchup play in mixed. But the weeks you're going to play him is when he has 2 starts like this week. I think he's one of those guys. He's you're going to kick the tires on him. He's like a temp to own guy where you'll try him this week, and how he fares is what you'll do with him after the week. In the deeper leagues where an ERA in the mid to high 3s isn't a kill shot, like NL Tout, that's where I actually went for him. But I'm 10 strikeout game not that long ago with some really good video on that. We were excited to pick him up then, and then he had a couple of bad turns and people dropped him. I'm still optimistic that Weathers could be an interesting fantasy player this year.
Yeah, I agree. The starts in particular, I would much rather keep him on my streaming radar. The starts aren't particularly good for him this week. So like in a deeper format, I was happier to roster Lively with the Mets and the Angels on tap. But I think Weathers is the better pitcher, and I think he needs to be a weekly consideration for streaming when you just look at his schedule and say, he's 7% rostered right now. So he's somebody where 11%. So he's somebody where you just check him on Sunday night. Who's Weathers going to face this week? Team context isn't great, but he's been a solid enough arm, and we'll, we see if we can pull the trigger.
I do have to mention with Lively, his FIP is 4.36, which is a solid jump over the 3.06 front door ERA.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's always hard to know what to do with guys like that because you feel like the correction is coming.
He is 100% a matchup-based streamer for me. I like some of the changes to the pitch mix that he made when he was overseas, and then he came back as a reliever last year, and so we're starting to see what his pitch mix is as a starter. And I think the addition of the sweeper and what he's, how he's attacking makes him interesting when you're facing like the White Sox, the Tigers, the Angels, things like that. And
there's soft landings out there. Yeah, for sure.
You get a decent amount of those while playing for the Guardians, the Central. Like you get some of those soft landings. But like that's why I'm not concerned that he struggled against the Rangers. Like you should never have pitched an arm like Ben Lively against the Rangers. That's not what he's in consideration for.
Right. You put him in a position to fail.
Most times I'd only pitch him in 15-team leagues too, unless I'm in a really deep kind of 12-team. But yeah, we don't want to overextend what these streamers are. Like I know even if they give you a good run, like he had a really good run, that doesn't mean you push him against the Rangers. That's not why he had a good run to begin with.
Right. Give him position to succeed. And also you should promote I think it's Wednesday, your pitch mix column comes out, which is just much read, really granular stuff. And we're in the golden age of analysis for this type of, it used to be, we used to speculate on it. We didn't have the data that we have now. We didn't have the video that we have now. So that's one of my favorite reads of the week. And I hope other people enjoy that as well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that comes out every Wednesday on NBC Sports, mixing it up. I did post an article today. Our final article looking at the StatCast, like swing, the bat tracking data. We can toggle between counts. So I thought it was really interesting to look at swing length in when hitters were ahead in the count and when they got behind in 2-strike counts, and whose swing length changes the most. And so I just covered some of those guys, understanding that also like swing length on low and away pitches is naturally longer, right? Because the bat has to travel longer to get to low outside pitches.
Just physics.
So just using this doesn't really tell us who's trying to shorten up their swing, because you could try to shorten up your swing, and if you're getting curveballs in the dirt away in 2 strikes, it might not show. But it was just interesting to note a couple of guys who are off to good starts to the year, like Connor Wong, Abraham Toro, a guy like Brendan Donovan. Those guys showed up on the list as like really shortening their swing up, their swing length with 2 strikes. And so that was interesting to do, and that's on NBC Sports right now if you guys want to check that out as well.
And Toro's become a player I picked up a bunch of places, hitting leadoff for. I know Oakland didn't have a good week, but at least they're not the punching bag. I thought they were going to be like look out below. Instead, they're just kind of mediocre to bad. But he's batting leadoff every day, it seems like, and he's probably going to qualify at multiple positions. So I'm a pro Toro guy. And it's interesting you talk about different approaches. I mean, in a different era, everybody shortened up with 2 strikes. People didn't want to strike out, with the exception of like a Reggie Jackson or somebody like that. And that was a big story with Bellinger last year, right? His pitch to pitch approach was radically different. And there's been a lot of talk about what that meant. And I thought he was a difficult guy to try to figure out going into this year. I'm still optimistic that he's going to turn it around. I realize he was hurt for a while. But again, we're in the golden age of data, and there's just so much stuff. And I realize we're picking through a lot of this stuff. And some of the analysis that we're doing it's the first inning, second inning, third inning. We're going to have a much better handle on this stuff maybe in a few years. The stuff that Eno Saris is doing with Stuff Plus, it's good now. I think it's going to be great someday. And it's just fun to just go. I can't say enough how cool it is that we have, Baseball Savant. We have all these new stats, and we have all this video exposure. Because in the old days, you're just looking at box scores. You had to speculate on almost everything.
Yeah, you definitely did. And it's been nice to kind of like dig into this and understand it's not a perfect science, right? We'll find some things as we come out. Some of the things we dig into won't be as worthwhile, but that's the fun of it, is to kind of see what you can get. And you can follow all of our continued research. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Samulski NYC. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. Please remember to rate and review this podcast. If you stuck with us this long, it is really helpful for us. And we will see you on Wednesday for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.